Good afternoon, good morning, depending on what time zone you're in. My name is Gregory Blatt. I look after marketing communications at Solar Impulse. Welcome today to all the EPFL alumni joining us here today. A special welcome to Aymeric Salin, who's the chairman of the board of the EPFL alumni, and just as importantly, an active partner of Solar Impulse. I've had the pleasure of working with Aymeric on several missions over the last few years. It was Aymeric actually who initiated today's hangout, and his idea was to connect the EPFL community with André Borschberg, who we all know is an EPFL alumni. André is the co-founder, the CEO, and the pilot of Solar Impulse, and particularly well known in the last couple of months, having flown one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult, first ever record-breaking five-day, five-night flight from Nagoya, Japan to Hawaii, and we'll learn a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. For those who don't know, Solar Impulse was a project that started in 2003. It was there that André Borschberg met Bertrand Piccard, who had the idea. André was asked to do the feasibility study. After the feasibility study, they joined forces and they created Solar Impulse. Solar Impulse is not just a project in aviation. It's a project in demonstrating the potentials of clean energy, energy savings, and what energy reduction can bring in terms of improving our quality of life and promoting sustainable development. Solar Impulse has been actively flying since 2010, when we undertook the first day and night flight, which is a proof of concept. A year later, we flew to Belgium and then to the Paris Bourget Air Show. In 2012, we crossed continents and we flew to Morocco. So this was our first ocean crossing or sea crossing. And in 2013, we flew from San Francisco to New York. In March of this year, in 2015, we started the Around the World flight, having left from Abu Dhabi, then going to Oman, to India, to two stops in China, to Japan, and then to Hawaii. We covered just under 18,000 kilometers, and we did about 255 hours of flying time. And next year, we will complete the second half of the Around the World, which will bring us from Hawaii back to Abu Dhabi, which was our original starting point. We have 5 topics identified today with different alumni who have been chosen to ask these questions, and Aymeric to help me with the follow-up questions and co-moderating with me. But maybe just as an introductory question to André. André, this is a unique project. It's never been done before, full of emotions and surprises. But let me talk about, what was your first memory, your first impression when you heard about this project 13 years ago and they asked you to join? What was going through your mind at that particular time?
It's nice to think about the past, Greg, but let me first say hello to everybody. It's a great pleasure, to be with all you guys who have been in this fantastic school here in Lausanne. I remember the time when I was in these walls as a student, I guess about 40 years ago, so it's not yesterday. Came back in the year 2000, and as you will see afterwards, doing some work. And effectively, after this work, one day, that was February of 2003, I received a phone call of the Dean of the Engineering Faculty here in Lausanne. That was Michel Declerc at the time. And he asked me if we could see each other for a few minutes, and I dropped by in his office. We had a cup of coffee, and he told me about the idea of Bertrand Piccard to fly around the world with renewable energies, without the dependence on oil. And I tell you, the first time I heard that, I immediately found it really, being a fantastic idea, but for a lot of reasons. First of all, I knew Bertrand, not personally, but from what he did. His father had a submarine here in Lausanne in 1964. Of course, I followed, like many of you, his flight around the world with the balloon. So I always thought that this was a guy I could really work with. And so Michel Declerc asked me if I would be interested with this project, interested to do a feasibility study, build up a team. And I remember that I answered him that I need 24 hours to think about it, but I tell you, my decision was already taken. This was really something I wanted to do.
Wonderful.
Excellent. Emmerich, do you want to pick up on that, please?
Yeah, it was a great pleasure. First of all, thank you so much, André, for taking the time to speak with our alumni. For our network, you're one of us. So thank you for not only your time, but as well all the sorts of inspiration that you get to all of us with technology and passion. Bonding out. Well, not only that, today we have alumni, I think, from the 5 continents, so from all around the world, a bit like Solar Impulse, flying around the world. We're covering the world to listen to you. A bit more on EPFL and your relationship with EPFL. So I heard that you get that call for Mr. Declerc. That was the initiation of a project to do a feasibility study, but what was your relationship down the road? What has been the contribution of the school for your project? I'm sure that was more than just trying to understand if this can fly, yes or no.
You know, life is interesting. I mean, I don't know if it's the experience that, all the alumni have had in the past, but for me, really, life is interesting. And I remember in the year 2000, I decided to stop my business life for a while, at least a few months, and I wanted to do social work, helping people, not this time, not building up a business, but really truly trying to discover another part of what can be done on this planet. So I stopped a few months, and I wanted to stop a full year, in fact. And after a few months, I received a phone call from a good friend of mine who told me, "Listen, my brother would like to apply for a mandate at EPFL because there is a new president, Patrick Piccard, and he wants to restructure the school. And as you have, a good experience in this kind of question, would you like to join him?" And of course, I said, these guys has no chance to be accepted. And I said, of course, you can just put my name there. But contrary to what I thought, we were taken to help to reorganize the school, which we did. And that was the first time I met Patrick at the time. And really, I found that the school has chosen is not because he's still the president, I'm saying that, but I think he brought the school to a new level. He brought the school to a new direction, and what was really his goal at the time was to merge a lot of the departments to really try to build that project which was multidisciplinary. And that's what I did, and I think that's also the reasons why when in 2003 Bertrand Piccard came to see the school, him and Stefan Katsikas, which was the VP of Innovation at the time, when Bertrand presented the project, the school immediately liked this idea because it was a project which needed to bring a lot of people together to see if it was feasible. And I think that's reasons why, in fact, all these forces were brought together. EPFL on one side interested, me as being known by EPFL as on one side knowing how to build up a project, but the other side, what I did not mention, I've been a pilot in the Swiss Air Force for 25 years in the reserve, not as my major profession, and that's the reasons why also EPFL thought about me. And that's how we started, in fact, all together thinking about this possibility to build a solar-powered airplane. So, the life brings you in some places, and that's what I found extraordinary. It brings you opportunities, and if you have the chance to see them, or if you have the chance to pick them up, in some ways, what I would say the conscious to do it, it's funny how and where you go, and that was my experience in this in the beginning of this century.
Interesting. Let's visit some of our alumni in some of the continents that Emmerich had mentioned. We have Alex de Olivier Isosa from Oslo. I'm not sure that's a Norwegian name, but he is located in Norway. Alex?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's located in Norway, sunny Norway. André, first I'd like to congratulate for the achievement so far on the Solar Impulse. It's very impressive. And then my question is, what would be your best advice regarding people management and what should one be looking for when building a team to succeed with such a project?
Well, thank you first for your nice comment, and I think you're right to speak about the team, because of course, you know, sometimes you see the pilots, but behind the pilots there has been and there are a lot of people. When we fly around the world, we have about 140 people around us to make it feasible, to make it happen. And this was one of my big also concern when I started. And interestingly, what I did at the time was, I mean, on one side, obviously to look for talents, to look for experienced people, but I really tried to find people who have achieved something and knew deeply or extremely well one domain which was required. But I didn't care at all about the way they could be integrated in the team. So we ended up with different nationalities, different cultures, different style, people who were self-made entrepreneurs, people who had long studies, scientists, experienced engineers, young, old, everything. And this was the result, in fact, of doing my cherry-picking strategy. And what happened was that, of course, it was at the beginning a big mess in terms of communications, as people didn't understand each other, couldn't see the benefit of what the other guy was doing. So I really spent most of my time then to bring people together. I saw myself as the person and as a role to make sure that everyone first would have the right tool to perform, but then to create the right environment in terms of human relations, in terms of physical environment, so that people could perform. But it was coaching, it was conflict resolution, and I very often joke about that, and I say that if I would develop a new activity or start a new activity, I could become a couple therapist. But it was a lot about listening, about making people understand each other, but ultimately it worked. I give you one simple example. We had engineers on the Swiss-German part of Switzerland who are my structure guys. I mean, people who know how to build a structure, know a little bit about carbon fibers, but not so much. On the other side, I brought a company which is Decision, which is also someone who comes from the EPFL as an alumni, but someone who has no experience in aircraft building, but a lot of experience in the material he uses, carbon fibers. So the first time I brought these people together, my engineer said, I mean, these guys build boats, he will never understand what an airplane needs. And of course, the other guy at Decision said, these guys are great, but they will never understand how to use my materials, carbon fibers. And then truly, it took us almost 2 years to start working on ideas, and then respect developed, and communication started to emerge, and then really we could start to have synergies and to be innovative. So my lesson there is that, but first you have to be ready to spend quite a long time. Second, I think really it's not the fact that people work well in team which creates value, it's the difference. I mean, when you have different opinion, it's sometimes difficult, but that's how, by confronting them, you get results there. So I would not be afraid of doing that, but I really would look, for the people who, at best, I mean, who have the best potential to help me to go and achieve my goal and spend time to make it happen.
Let's spend a minute on this, André, the role of leadership in achieving ambitious goals. As CEO, one of your responsibilities was responsible for building the airplane. And I mean, what does it take to lead a team of engineers where everybody at the beginning said it was impossible to do? You went to talk to different airplane manufacturers and people in the industry, and then how does that affect motivation when they're starting in a project where they know the odds are against us?
But it does make it easy, because of course you don't get the people who are looking for security. I mean, for the people who would like to have a job for the next 5 or 10 years and be sure that they will have it, it's not the right place to be. So you will end up by selecting people who are ready, in fact, to to take this risk and to be part of this challenge. But I guess as a manager, you have to bring the energy. And I will explain you by what I mean by the energy. In such a project, you very often have, of course, setbacks. It develops differently. That's the way you plan it. It's more difficult. You discover something that you did not anticipate. You make failures. And these are the time as you as a leader, you as a CEO can make the difference. Because of course you can focus only on the drawbacks, you can focus only on the difficulty, but you don't build motivation, or you can try and spend time to try to see what's good about this difficulty. Because you need to find another path, you need to find another way, and that's what I did in a lot of occasions. And behind every obstacles, behind every problem, there is an opportunity. I mean, I have stories. I mean, if we have time, I can really share one very interesting one. I don't know if we have the time to do that, but that's really what I learned during all these 12 years, is obstacles can help you to grow. Obstacles can help you to find a better way. And in fact, if you have the attitude not maybe to welcome obstacles, but at least to be extremely positive about it, that's the way that you keep the motivation at a very high level.
Let's come back to that in a second because it's interesting. But before that, I'd like to invite Cindy from Melbourne to pick up on the role of leadership. Are you there, Cindy?
Hi.
Hey.
Yes. Hi, Andre. Thank you for your amazing achievement. It's a really pleasure for me to talk today. I'm at the moment an educator here in Melbourne and always trying to inspire those young people. So I think it's important for them to try and build a skill set that they will use later in life. So my question to you would be about skills and what skill acquired during your studies at EPFL has helped you the most in achieving this amazing project?
I think EPFL gave me a lot. I mean, it gave me the possibility to understand or to better understand challenges. Gave me the tools, but in some ways also partly the attitude to solve and try to find solution on difficulties. So I really got here a frame and I would even say a spirit, which I developed all the time, because afterwards I had the chance also to have different experiences going in the same direction. One was in the MIT, the other one was at McKinsey. Well, as I started my career as a consultant, nobody is perfect, but that was my path at least. But EPFL was the starting point, and I think without this education, without the professors I had, because some of them were really good, and also for me really inspiring, without this, I think I would not have done the following step afterwards. So I'm really extremely happy to have the chance to go through this this education. And at the same time, I was becoming an Air Force pilot. I had a lot of offers to be a pilot, a professional pilot in the Air Force, but also at Swissair. But I always thought that this would limit myself. And I think EPFL brought me the curiosity to go after other type of challenges.
Hey, bouncing back on that, Andre, I mean, you're clearly a hero on multiple levels, because not only you promote technology, you go through whatever you need to do to make it happening, but most of it is there is an element of death in what you do. I mean, a few months ago, you crashed in an helicopter, so you have definitely some very solid angel with you. But during that flight from Japan to Hawaii, there's been as well some significant challenge in taking decision. The plane was not where it was supposed to be. The risk factor was high. Probability to end up in water and to wait very long time for anyone to come to rescue you. How do you deal with your team and with your family? Decisions to be taken that are so important.
That's an important point to touch there. I think you can look at it from different perspectives. First, to understand, I think, in which position the team works. You certainly realize that engineers working at Solar Impulse know that whatever they do can have a positive or negative impact on safety. And safety in airplane is extremely important, and they know there will be a pilot in the airplane, and normally it's, or partly it's me, and they meet me also almost every day, or at least every week. So they know that this gentleman they see will be one sitting in the cockpit, and of course they have a level of empowerment which is completely different than what I have seen. As they know that what they do is so important, it's becoming their life project. I mean, but maybe almost at a point where it's going too far. I mean, it's owning the project, it's owning the airplane, it's to be totally involved. And for some people, maybe this was almost too much emotionally. And this we experienced when we did the flight to Hawaii. Don't know if some of you has followed what happened, but we were based in Japan. We tried many days, many weeks to find the right weather window. Weather, of course, is very critical for us. Flying 5 days, 5 nights needs a weather forecast which is done maybe a day before or 2 days before. So the weather forecast is 6-7 days. It's not reliable. Reliability is about 30%, so you have 70% chance that the weather will be different. So it's a risky situation. And when we started, I had to do a test flight for different reasons. And after the test flight, there was one equipment which did not work. And this equipment is what I call the virtual co-pilot. It's an electronic box which supervises what the airplane is doing, completely independent. And then at a certain time, wake up the pilot through different ways, sounds, but also vibration, and tells the pilot, look, you should be careful here because something is not working. The autopilot is getting crazy, so wake up and do something there. This box didn't work. So of course, all the engineers said the airplane is not in perfect order, you cannot proceed. This is vital for you because you cannot sleep if you don't have this this equipment available, so please go back to Japan and we'll repair it. But I looked at it differently. The airplane status is one part of it, but as I said before, the weather is the other part, and the weather really this day and this week was extremely good. And weather plays a very important role for an airplane of the size of a 747, extremely big and very light, the weight of a car. The car that you see passing behind me, and of course weather is playing a very important factor. So I looked at it in a global way, and I had the impression that I could compensate the deficiencies of this missing equipment or failing equipment. I could compensate it by sleeping differently, by using other devices, and I felt comfortable that leaving was fine. But the engineers didn't agree. So there was a huge emotion, and I think due to their extremely strong involvement, as I mentioned, the fact that they feel owning the project, and it became a big crisis in the team. It was very difficult for me because going against their recommendation, which I truly respect, was not easy. But I guess I was the only one knowing what I can do in the cockpit, appreciating the entire picture, and that's the reasons why I gave it a go. But Enrique, you mentioned also, you know, the question of family. This was my deepest problem at this moment because I knew my family was watching. My family would know that the equipment was not working, and I really didn't know if I could impose such a high level of stress for the next 5 days and for them not knowing if I would be able to manage it or not. And I mean, I really had the stomach upside down. It was like having, you know, a very big, very heavy object instead of my stomach, and it took me the day and the following night to go over it. Mm-hmm. So decisions are not easy, but I guess, you know, leadership is not just coaching people and leading people in good times. It's also showing that you can take very tough decisions, difficult decisions, that you take the responsibility for these decisions. And of course, in this situation, it was the utmost responsibility, because I also, you know, could put in some ways my life at risk in this case. So it was hard, but I believe still today that this was the right way to go.
Let's spend a couple minutes on that, Andre. I mean, you did spend 117 hours in the plane. You covered 7,202 kilometers. As I said, 5 days, 5 nights. Talk to us a little bit about, after you got through this engineering difficulty, I mean, how did you, I mean, everybody wants to know the obvious questions about eating and sleeping, but what type of preparation, what type of mental state did you have to put yourself in to accomplish this?
Yeah, that's important, Greg, that you mentioned it as well. I started to think about this flight almost 12 years ago, because I knew we had to do it when we did the feasibility with EPFL. We knew it would take a long time. We knew that it would be only one pilot, so we knew that it had to be different from what had been done up to now. So I started to work on it, I would say at least 3 years before in big detail. And what I tried to do is to visualize all these difficult situations I could face in the same way that what happened. I guess I would have been surprised if the flight would have been smooth. I don't want to say I would have been disappointed, because that's almost a little bit cynical, but in some ways I knew that something difficult would happen, so I tried to visualize it in advance. I tried to visualize also what the worst case scenario could be, and for us the worst case scenario would be that the airplane disintegrates in the air, that the pilot is forced to jump out, use the parachute, get into the water. So we trained this with Bertrand quite a long time, and by training this, I guess I felt that I knew how to cope with this worst situation. And when you know how to cope with the worst situation, you can put it somewhere in your brain and you can forget about it. So I think this visualization I did helped me to mitigate a little bit the emotions I had the first day. And the training I did for this worst case scenario helped me also to really focus on the flight afterwards, not thinking about the big risk of needing the parachute and getting into the water. So what happened at this time, and this was after the first day, the first time where I could put all these emotions of the decision on the side, I could focus on the present moment. You know, if you think about the destination, if you think about how many hours are left in the flight, 80 hours, 75 hours, 70 hours, it's a nightmare because you're just focused at the end. So in fact, what I try to do is to also think that 5 days, 5 nights was very short, and I just had the time to enjoy it. And I really focused on what I was doing, and in such a very tiny space, I had to do my work, my activities in slow motion, because I could have disturbed and destroy equipment, sensitive parts. So everything is done with conscious, I mean really with a conscious mind. And when you talk about, you know, being mindful, I guess I reached this stage there. And that was, I mean, for me, the greatest moment. And I built this cockpit as being a home where I lived, where I worked, where I slept, where I ate, where I did my exercise, my yoga, my meditation, and everything.
Interesting. I know that on that point that Vincent from Lausanne wanted to ask a question on the on your state of mind and how you prepared for this flight. Vincent?
Hello everyone around the world, and thank you to the Solar Impulse team for making this project real. My question to Andre is that, yeah, exploration comes into end with passion, but also obviously danger. During the preparation and during your flight itself, you must have felt some really big fears, and how did you deal with that? So first, during the preparation, but also like during the flight, I'm sure it's completely different to deal with that.
What I did was really to try to anticipate this, and as I mentioned, in fact, if you train the worst case scenario, and for me the worst case scenario was the disintegration of the airplane in the air because of a failure of the structure. If this would happen, I could not prepare the bailout. I would be forced to bail out very fast, by day, by night, in very difficult situations. So this would have been the worst case. So when you train this, you really get, after a while, the feeling that you know how to do it. And I reached a state when I said to myself, if this happens, enjoy it, because you don't have the chance to bail out from an airplane over the Pacific in the middle of the night. I mean, it's an unbelievable, in some ways, opportunity. So if you take it positively, it doesn't make you feel as being so threatening. You prepare for it, so you know that you can handle it, so you know that you will survive. The rest is purely experience. So that was for me the best way to really deal with this feeling. And then, you may think it's stupid, but when I was flying over the Pacific, I really looked at this ocean and I talked to it, and I said, if I have to come to see you and end up in the water, I'm sure you're going to treat me well. So I created this relationship, and then you feel at ease, you feel fine. And when I reached this point, I could really enjoy myself in this cockpit, because the fears were gone. And I think for me that's an experience that's something we can do in any situation in life. If you have in front of you something which is unknown and which makes you be afraid of, if you try to imagine what could happen, worst case scenario, if you train them, or if you think about them, if you really try to understand what you would do step by step, then I'm sure you will discover that if this happens, you'll be able to manage, and it will make you feel much more secure about the risk there. So that's what I'm also trying to do in a lot of business and professional situation. Look at this worst case, analyze it, understand it, know how I would manage it, and at the end, the threat is disappearing, and then you can really focus with your entire mind on what to do, and you increase your chance of success.
Interesting. Can I, Andre, you mentioned before, I want to move back to, we talked about your pilot and humaning challenge, and you said you wanted to maybe share a couple examples of some of the leadership challenges. Particularly, a lot of entrepreneurs are with us today. We all know entrepreneurial companies suffer setbacks, and the roadmap changes from the very beginning. What are some of your experiences in setbacks, and by all means you've lived several of them, and how have you changed these? Because you mentioned that setbacks can become opportunities. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you lived some of the experiences there. Sure.
Let me try to make it simple, but you have to imagine the airplane as having a skeleton like a human body, bones, but instead of bones we have really rigid parts which makes the structure of the airplane. Now that's what makes it its stiffness, and then you can put some soft materials which makes its shape around it. And this skeleton is made of carbon fibers. Of course, it's really what gives the structure of the airplane. And you know that we have built 2 airplanes. The first one flew in 2010, and when we knew enough, we developed a second airplane, but we wanted to make it lighter, more efficient, of course with higher performance, so we really pushed the limit further. And we build what I call the backbone of the airplane. That's the main spar in the wing. That's a very big part, 70 meters long, part of carbon fibers. It's a little bit like a box if you look it across the parts, but it's a very complex one. It takes almost 1 year to design, to calculate with finite element and so on. It takes almost 1 year to build for Decision with 60 different thermal cycles. So something very difficult. And each time you build a part, before you integrate into the airplane, you have to test it. You have to test to the ultimate load that you get in the airplane to make sure that it's going to work fine. We did the test 3 years ago, and at 100% after days of testing, when we reach really the maximum load, suddenly this part explodes. I mean, literally break up. So you can imagine the shock, in fact, to everyone, because we didn't expect it. We were used to be successful in the way we design and build parts, and this one was the most important. So immediately you can understand that if we want to rebuild the part, it takes another year, which means that we have to fly around the world a year later. You have to finance this year, which at the time cost about 10 million US dollars or Swiss francs or euro. That's about the same today. So big, for a company like us, big problem. But what happened is that, of course, on one side, I really try to focus on understanding why it happened, rebuilding the confidence, because everybody lost confidence in himself. Of course, trying to find ways to very fast, find another solution and get to the goal of having the parts available as soon as possible. But at the same time, I started to try to understand what it meant for us. And when you have 1 more year, in fact, to go for the flight around the world, in fact, what we started to say, we lost a year. And very quickly, I started to understand that that was not true. In fact, we gained a year. Suddenly, we have 1 more year available. Of course, we have to finance it, but we have 1 more year available, which is great. So the question was how to use it, what we can do out of it. So that's where I spent time, and I spent time with Greg also, and we decided to bring the first airplane, the one which was already flying in the United States, to cross the country from the West Coast to the East Coast. Something that the pioneers used to do that's what Lindbergh did before crossing the Atlantic. But for us, maybe more important, the goal was to look for partners in the US. And if you don't fly in the United States, you don't exist for the United States. And so that's what we did. We brought airplane to San Francisco. I think it took us a few months to get organized, extremely fast. When we were in San Francisco, we met Larry Page from Google. Larry decided to become a partner, and of course, having Google as a partner is something which is truly fantastic. It brought us money, the money we needed, of course, to repair the parts, but it brought us also all the marketing power of Google. I don't know if some of you saw that when we fly, not all the time, but we have a link in the front page of Google under the small window where you type your word that you are looking for. There was the reference of Solar Impulse. You could click on it and get to our website. So this was, an incredible help and support for us. It gave us also, of course, the possibility to train the United States, to get the FAA approval, something which was tremendously useful for the flight around the world. So from a problem that we had, losing 1 year at the beginning, understanding that we gained a year, finding this partner thanks to this decision, having really the positive attitude to see what was good about this failure. And I think that's really what I learned, is that very often we spend so much time not to complain, but to be sad, to be sour, and to try to speed up, in fact, to compensate that. We should spend more time to understand what it means and where we can find opportunities to do something different afterwards. So that was, for me, a fantastic experience.
I think Leah from Chicago wanted to ask a follow-up question on that point.
Hi, André. So my question for you is, with the experience you have acquired building up a project with such adversity, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are faced with what can sometimes seem like insurmountable challenges? And so I know you've given some answers, such as keeping positive attitude, taking responsibilities, and staying confident. But how would you deal, like in practice, with technical issues, resources, or time constraints?
Well, you have different ways to look at it. I mean, if you talk about practical thing, money is of course an extremely important question. And when you think about money, what we did, and I think that was really where Bertrand, my partner, was extremely active and helpful and critical, was that we never stopped looking for that. In fact, when you get financing as an entrepreneur, you say, that's great, I have a year and a half finance, now I can focus on my job, which is also understandable. Fortunately, we are two. So what happened is that he really continued day after day, weeks after weeks, to make contacts, to meet people and so on, and to get new partners on board, but before we really needed them. But despite that, that's true that sometimes we were very close also to run out of money. Huh? It was never the case, but we were close to. So my recommendation is that this is an endless story, and this is part of the role of the entrepreneur. And of course, our partnership has been extremely beneficial. And if you think about partner with people who are not the same as you. You know, very often we say, this guy is a great partner because we are very similar, so we get along well. But the goal is not to get along well with a partner. The goal is to create value, and you create value when you think differently. But of course, when you think differently, you don't have the same opinions, so sometimes it's difficult. But we work like a couple. I mean, we have our session every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, where we sit together like a couple, discuss, explain our position, try to understand the other one. But we do it because we understand that we are stronger together than separate. And that was also, I mean, for me, a fantastic discovery. Because in my life, I partnered sometimes with people with whom I was very close, and it didn't work well, but I didn't realize it why. But when I partnered with Bertrand, where we are quite different, sharing the same passion, of course, I think it became more obvious.
Excellent. We have 9 minutes, or actually 8 minutes left. So, I'd like to cover 2 topics. Solar Impulse is both a technology project and a communication project. Technological demonstration of what is possible and communicating the values behind that. I know Emmerich wanted to elaborate on that and put forth a question to you in that area. Emmerich?
Yeah, maybe what I can do, I will change a bit the question, Gregory, to rebound on what André just started to cover, which is basically what we heard is Solar Impulse is like a technology startup, and is a technology startup. Now, the different type of financing between sponsoring and investor is something different here. But I think that there is a lot of commonality. The first thing is what you heard is entrepreneur is you discover what you're made of when you really face it. And I think that what André talked about was not only about himself, but as well his engineer. I think that one of the questions that I would love to hear him covering is when those engineers that had basically the responsibility of his life in his hand, your team, André, can freeze or can basically unleash power, and how basically your team reacted. But to come back to the entrepreneurship and startup, I mean, 2 things that you mentioned is, one is always take more time, and the second is always take more money. And what it means is at a point of time, you develop the technology, then you shift and go into a commercialization. So you shift from a technology team to a sales team. And you always take too long to get the sales guy on board, and maybe for you was to bring the flight guy on board. So here the question is, in that context of people starting companies, changing team from people unleashing their power because of fear to your budget that has exploded. Tell us a bit about changing of team and changing people here.
Yeah, I think you raised 2 interesting questions. I mean, the first one was also, as you mentioned, the the budget that you believe is going to be the right budget for your project. And just to give you the way we went, the first time we made an estimate which was based on analysis of what other people have been done, on the very simple evaluation of what it would cost. We came to the conclusion that we needed 30 million, but this was extremely early, and the 30 million happened to be completely wrong. So thanks God, in fact, we did not base our relationship with partners on these numbers. I think it took us more time to really understand what it could cost. And then we came to the conclusion that, you know, a budget of 100 million was realistic. Ultimately, I think we spent 130, 140, so 30 to 40% more, which is not too bad, because I would say very often you end up by at least doubling. Well, if you think about the 30 million we had at the beginning, it's a tremendous difference. Huh? So that's true. It's extremely difficult at the beginning to have a good understanding. For your second question, I think it's also an interesting one, because we had different phases. But at the beginning, there was really exploration about technologies, identifying how to build this airplane, what to use, which way to manufacture the parts, which type of solar cells. I mean, everything had to be analyzed, explored, identified. So what I try to do is to have the people completely open. As you heard at the beginning, I had really people from different experience. So I had sometimes competing teams. So we had the different projects in parallel. And then we say, okay, in 3 months, let's see, in fact, you know, which kind of results we get between both, and then we'll make a choice. So it was very open, not much planning. You don't spend still a lot of money, because you can identify, in fact, how much efforts you make. But I think the culture in this kind of organization was to be extremely open-minded and having the least amount of barriers. So that was, I guess, the first 2.5 years that we worked with this attitude. But as soon as we have identified the technologies we wanted to have on this airplane, and then we moved on the design side, culture had to change completely, because then we had to select, we had to define, we had to plan, we had to budget, and the change was hard. At the beginning, we were very bad. We were missing all the milestones. We were always late. People didn't understand that, and it took me, I mean, I don't know, a year, in fact, to really change the culture. So I don't know if I could have make it, or if I could make it faster, but it's difficult. But if one has to realize that you don't need, and you certainly don't need the same way of managing, depending on the phase that you are in. We didn't go in the selling mode. We went on to the mission mode, which is also something different. Where safety becomes a huge issue. So again, in fact, you have a change in culture, but I think it's important to recognize it early enough and to anticipate it.
Excellent. We have a couple minutes left, and I think what's on everybody's mind is, you know, what next on the Round the World and post Round the World. And to help position this last point, I'd invite Alexandra from London to ask the question.
Yes, thank you. Let me add my voice to the others to congratulate you for your achievements. And while you are famous for using solar for the plane and for green transport, I'm also very impressed by the weight of the structure. And I was wondering first, a very technical and basic question: is your plane still a Faraday cage? And also, when do you think that you can take this technology and translate it to, let's say, cars? So, see composite cars and, you know, high volume production and low cost of this type of technology.
I think we have different ways to leverage on what we did. On one side, the technology we have is brought by partners. New materials by Solvay Bayer from the chemical industry, for example. And these companies are using the developments they made for us in providing now solutions for their customers. So it can end up in cars, it can end up in constructions. It's not totally transparent for us, I mean, as long as we don't really ask for this information, but that's one way. The second, I think what we did leads to further development. If you take a company like Decision, Decision has learned to be active now in the world of aviation and will certainly continue in this field. So they developed fabrication methods, but using extremely aggressive technologies. The thinnest layer of carbon fibers we use today is 25 grams per square meters. It's a third of the weight of a sheet of paper that you get from your printer. So it's extraordinarily thin. So of course this is only for very special applications, and I'm not sure for the mass production yet, because I would say it's the right-hand corner of the application. But what we have in mind now with what we did is to build an unmanned version of Solar Impulse. You certainly have heard a lot about drones. There are a lot of drones products now coming live in the market, and we believe that there is an opportunity to build the platforms which could fly 6 months, for example, at 20 kilometers above the airliners, providing observation, communication kind of capabilities, but of course in a very sustainable way, replacing partly potentially what satellites could do, are doing, but again, in fact, with much lower impact on the environment. You know that companies like Google and Facebook have projects in these directions, so we may also do some cooperation with them. But we have the most experience today in operating such an airplane around the world, and we have quite a lot of experience of building such an airplane. So if we replace the pilot by an automatic system, I tell you the engineers will be extremely happy because they hate pilots. You know, a pilot for an engineer is an unpredictable entity, and so that's certainly a very good news if we move to this field. But that's at least one domain where we could expand and use these technologies, and the goal, of course, is to really produce hundreds of these if this is feasible in the future.
And André, if you think that scaling down a project like yours, basically scaling down Solar Impulse to put that in the shape of a drone versus all those guys that try to go in the bottom-up way, which must be much more difficult, how many years in advance do you think you have in comparison to any competition that are trying to come into that market?
It's difficult to know, but certainly, I would say certainly a couple of years there. But we don't know exactly what the other one are doing, but nobody was able to launch such a big object. There's one company, I mean, which is linked to Airbus today. They have something flying, but it's 30 kilograms or 50 kilograms. Our airplane payload only is 250 kilograms, so it's a completely different domain. So you're right to mention it. Of course, you know, things are happening extremely fast, so we should not lose time on our side neither if we want to keep this advance. But on the other side, I think competition is great because, you know, it's because of competition and because of having many people in this field that you really create the market. The market is very big. The market will be available for many people at the beginning. So I'm happy to have other people active in the same field, because it tells you also that you're not the only one. Sometimes I'm a little bit anxious if I'm the only one thinking it's a good idea.
Excellent. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, we've actually passed our, but this is so interesting, so I took the liberty of keeping it going a little bit. Very insightful, André, about how entrepreneurship is mixed with exploration. Emmerich, a big thank you to you for initiating this.
Thank you to you guys.
Excellent idea. To the EPFL active alumni, thank you for your insightful questions, and for all the other alumni, thank you for participating. I invite you all to follow through, watch us. We're broadcast live, and I think I see André who would like to say the absolute closing remark. And since he is the CEO, I've got to give him that privilege, especially if I want to come to work tomorrow.
No, I think you guys, you are alumni of this fantastic school, and it's a wonderful world. And I know that Emmerich has a lot of great plans to develop this, to strengthen this. But let's see this as a big asset. There's a lot of things to do. What EPFL is doing currently in its development, in setting up now a new is also an extraordinary effort. So let's get together and build a fantastic group around the world. So it was great to be together with you, and looking forward to be with you another time.
Thank you, everybody. And once again, Emmerich and all our active participants, a big thank you, and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.